I'm here with my colleague André Dudemaine. My name is Alexandre Nequado. We have a special guest this week, Simon Bird, who is indigenous language speaker, mostly in Cree language. So, Simon, if you could introduce yourself to our audience.
Now, as we say in the Y dialect, and also in the TH dialect and the N dialect, as a way to say greetings to all of you, or sometimes people say I shake all of your hands. Now, my name is Simon Bird. I'm from South End Ranger Lake. In our language, our community is called Wapa Tiguchuano, a word morph made from two words to describe the location. As you know, as many people know, our Cree people are very practical. And so the description of our community stems from Wapao, which means narrows. Ipmichuak, there is a current. Wapa Tiguchuano, the place with the narrows with the current is what my community is called. And it's TH dialect. And I speak TH, Y, and dialect, learning L dialect. And I'm fascinated with Anishinaabe. I strongly believe that our Algonquin languages, especially the Cree dialects, have more in common than differences. And currently, I live out in Ottawa. I have a background in education. I have a Bachelor of Education, a Master's of Education Administration, a Master's in Northern Governance and Development, and I'm slowly working towards a PhD in Indigenous Language Revitalization, as I try to build upon the strength of our people, the value of our language, and empower our Indigenous people. I have had the privilege and the honor to have a political background. I was the fourth vice chief of the Federation of Saskatchewan Indian Nations, as it was once called, a regional organization representing 64 First Nations in Saskatchewan. And with that came a lot of a lot of traveling, a lot of networking, and getting to know folks outside of my community. Building upon my experience in working in different schools, different First Nations. And I've been married for 23 years to my wife from Thunderchild First Nation, who is a Plains Cree community. So, and my claim to fame when it comes to Indigenous language revitalization is I created Cree Simon Says, hashtag Cree Simon Says, is what you can find in groups in Facebook. It's not a public group, and it's not on Instagram or Twitter, and so that makes me an old content creator. As you can see, thank you for sharing. And as the title suggests, fantastic Crees and where you can find them. And so the goal of this Facebook group is really for my selfish benefit. I learn just as much as I try to share, and I'm there to celebrate as much of our language or languages as possible. And again, I firmly believe that we have more in common than we don't. And I've had some good people tell me that what I'm doing to promote the language has sparked an ember of curiosity that's taken their conversations to many great places. So I'll stop there, and I hope that introduction wasn't too long, but I'm ready for any questions that you have. FYI, hashtag Cree Simon Says has been around since 2015. And I could definitely talk a bit more about how it started, but I'm more interested in what you want to talk about today. And I hope that I can lend as much as I can get.
Well, with all your experience, all your journey on this Mother Earth, and all the knowledge you have on the language, I would rather say that your introduction was pretty short. And so we are very, very happy and very honored to have you with us today for our casual, friendly conversation. And when we Google Simon Bird, well, we have to add the Cree language. If not, we go to an English actor. But with Simon Bird Cree language, wow, we have, I don't know how many Google entries, a lot. And I saw one where Bruce Lee is speaking Cree. Can, can you speak about that?
And thank you very much for that. Yes, if you do go on YouTube as well and put in Cree Bruce Lee or Cree Star Wars, there's
Okay.
some good content that comes around. And for any good teacher, you'll notice that the format of the videos that I produce tries to reach a very wide variety of um, that ranges from fluent speakers all the way to people that do not know anything about the language, do not know one word. So, of course, our Cree language is a social language, which is quite the opposite from English. English is a very focused, condensed, modified language that in large part takes away the socializing, spending time describing stories, building that relationship between the speaker and the listener that happens in a lot of our older languages. I've noticed, and the Cree has so much in common with other indigenous languages, and I would say older languages around the world. So the format of Cree Bruce Lee, of course, for people of a certain generation, you would know that back when kung fu movies were introduced to communities, First Nations people never saw anybody that really looked like them, but they could definitely identify with somebody that they seen as a hero, and so of course Bruce Lee was a hero and a martial arts expert, and just fascinating to see on TV. And a lot of what was spoken was in either Mandarin or in another language. And of course, when kung fu movies came out, the lips would be moving and certain words would be said, and it was very off key and it was very entertaining to see. And I just happened to know a little bit about multimedia and some of the material that you can use and borrow without having to worry about copyright infringement. And I believe the statute of limitations is something like 50 years. And I just happened to have this clip, and I created Cree Bruce Lee. And I made sure that what was shared was some common Cree words. And of course, I had to try and use the Y dialect because the Y dialect people, my relatives, our relatives, the Y dialect speakers were the first ones to really be threatened with a language extinction, language loss. So the materials that have been produced that are out there right now in terms of books, dictionaries, teaching materials, even apps, has been far greater than the other dialects that have been able to retain their language a lot stronger. And of course, when you're faced with a pushback, of language loss. What you do is you react, and that's what happened in, of course, the '70s and to today, which is, and so there's more people that are hungry for the language, and they identify as wide dialect speakers, or maybe just having access to wide dialect material. And so I build off of that knowledge that I've studied Native studies, and I've studied, came across the stories of the realities of people that were really prevented from moving freely with the Indian agent, and having the pass system, and so and Northern First Nations being assimilated later. By ripple effect, roads didn't come into our northern communities until there was, after, well after World War II, and in the '60s and late '50s, there was a boom for mining natural resources, and of course those resources lead to the north, and as a byproduct, industry and provincial governments, they partnered with the federal government to make roads into our communities. So it's a fascinating history when you think about it, and all those things kind of start to be distilled in how I produce or have produced any language material that people have really caught on and have been interested. And that Cree Bruce Lee came at a time when I was a principal, and as you know, you're around students, and something that people may not realize is the Cree word for a child, awasis, is very common, a very common term across dialects. And the word for spirit, ahtak or ahtak, very, very common. And the word for star is also the same in a lot of our dialects. Ahtak, ahtagus, spirit and star. And I've been able to really, I have a really innate interest in our language, and I've seen this connection with our words, and some of the stories that I've learned in visiting people or meeting other people or listening to their stories. And I've been able to really piece together exactly what our elders have always stated. And of course, awasis is there's that word you can hear in there, wasu, which means he or she gives off light.
Washteo.
That's right. Washteo is if you see a light in the distance, you can see washteo. We say the same thing. But if you were to talk about a living thing, wasu, like we say that a vehicle is a living thing because the origin of the word is attached to the sled dogs, and of course it's the horseless carriage, and then now we have a vehicle, and we associate that same word as a living thing. So wasu. And of course, for a long time, we use words in our languages all the time, and we don't really realize the history that it carries. And of course, the word, when somebody's mad, kisuasu. Now, I'm not sure if that's the same word that you would use there, Alexandre. Kisuasu, he or she is mad.
Kijoazio.
So of course,
Kijoazio.
kisuasu. Now, when you think about that word, wasu, he or she gives off light, and kisuasu, it means he or she gives off fierce and intense light.
Heat.
What's that?
It gives off heat.
It gives off.
Heat.
Exactly. So that proves what our elders have said, and we're connected to things that are out there, the stars, energy, and how as we grow older, we start to really feel the energy from younger people. That's why elders just love small kids, and they hug babies. There's that contrast of energy that you can actually feel from young kids, and when young people are too busy with life, they don't pay attention to these things, and it's unfortunate. But I love being around young people. So when I was a principal, I would have a whole school, and we would joke around, and that would make me feel comfortable, and that would make me feel like I was in a safe place, and that would make me feel it was okay to joke around, and so that's the best creative stuff that I've ever done in my life was when I was in that safe space. Quite opposite from politics, and I'm still digging out arrows from my back from my days in politics, and unfortunately can be a really rough place at times. But I encourage anybody and everybody to really take a look at our language and what it has to offer. Another fascinating example that I often use in terms of how important our words are, and which clues you in to the to what it must have been like back in the old days, in terms of how people treated each other. And sometimes we hear people that people really revered relationships, connections. Respect was one of the the highest values. And sometimes when people say that too many times, it becomes rhetoric. It becomes you heard it before, but when you clue in, when you tie in those values or that philosophy of Indigenous people and what they prioritized, and you give a prime example of words that we use every day, it really makes you look at it from a different perspective, and your brain just kind of lights up, and it connects. And so that one of those words is the word for boy, napisis. The word for girl, isquisis. So in most of our dialects, the word for boy is a smaller version of the word man. Napisis, napil. Man, boy. Isquisis, isquil. Girl, woman. So in the Cree words, in the Cree dialects, isquisis, isquil, they sound the same. There's a connection, a very strong connection. And napisis and napil, very, very strong connection, because they sound the same. And which in fact, the literal translation for those words, boy and girl, are woman to be and man to be. Now, these words were a part of our everyday language, and all older people and elders had to say is treat that girl with respect, because they will be women someday. And when we're surrounded by aunties, our mom, our grandmother, our grandmothers, and extended family, it's very easy to be reminded that that young lady is to be treated with respect in the way you would treat the rest of your female family members. And it's a reminder for the adults to treat our children with respect, because they are the future generations that are going to be coming up quite fast. So it's a constant reminder, and of course, between Esqueces and Napisis, it's a constant reminder to treat each other with respect. So the amount of bullying we can determine was almost eradicated. The amount of child exploitation was very it was almost unheard of, because you were always surrounded by reminders in the language to treat people the way our kinship terms dictated that we should treat them. And so that's what I've always found fascinating, and I try to share these key words with anybody and everybody that would listen, and I've been very fortunate to have people see and confirm that is in fact why we have such a lot of our elders have such compassion, have a different way of approaching and seeing life as a gift, and acknowledging creator, and because we were always spiritual beings, because our language has all these reminders of how to behave with others, and how to behave with the land around us, and how to behave with the of course other people, our extended family members. So I hope that's kind of answers your question on Bruce Lee. Thank you so much. But if there's any other questions, I'm more than happy to connect. I find this, I could talk all day,
Well, we have all the day, if you want, in front of us. No, that's really fascinating. And when you say you want to to evolve away from politics, you are still in it, because Bruce Lee is an anti-imperialist hero. I remember when I was a young hippie, I traveled in North Africa, and Bruce Lee was really a hero there. And also in the Star Wars saga, the hero is fighting the Empire. So I see the Johnny McDonald statue get down when you speak Cree, even if you want to hide it. And no more kidding. I was just wondering, how come you went to develop all those tools in the internet?
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I didn't realize in terms of the political, political undercurrent of the material that I was producing is political in nature, and so the internet has, in many ways, provided a very similar atmosphere of what I know our indigenous people to have had before contact, and it's that freedom to connect in different ways, but also to be very careful and mindful of what you say, because our elders have always warned us that to be mindful of and how powerful our tongue is in terms of the power of words. And so there's a lot of examples. Cancel culture is not new for a lot of our elders, and they know that if we are to not be mindful of our words and who we associate with and how we conduct ourselves in society. There are people that or an entity that will come back at you in a negative way, and that we are to really focus on the best that this world has to offer and the gifts that it has provided. And so, the Cree people, I think, are in large part, very similar to what the internet and what cancel culture and having that freedom to focus on your priorities, because we ended up all over the place. We followed the river system, and if you didn't like your neighbor, you moved in your traditional territory. You moved over here with your family, and then that there's cultural norms that I've seen, and there's a term that I often use, and it's called kiam. Is a lot of people associate that word as a negative term. I think a comparison could be c'est la vie. I know a little bit of French, but I think that term, kiam, is an attitude towards, that life is what it is. But for a lot of people growing up, it also means I don't care. I don't care. And so it is often associated with I don't care. But one of the stories that I do like to share, and why Guillaume is a bit of a philosophy, and I've mentioned at times that it can be comparable to the Chinese emblem of yin and yang, where it's a circle and half of it is black and half of it is yellow. It's all in how you use it. So when I was growing up, my name, Simon Daniel Bird, comes from my late uncle, who died before I was born. And my dad, of course, loved his older brother and missed his older brother. And when I came around 2 years later, as a lot of Cree people, a lot of people still today, to remember and to honor their past loved ones, they will name their children by the same names. So when the police, one of the stories I heard from my late grandmother is when the police came to see them about how he passed away. He passed away because there was lots of drinking, and he got into some argument, and there was a whole bunch of young people that beat him up and kicked him in the head one too many times. And when he passed away, the police came to my grandparents and asked, would you like to press charges? And of course, that's a foreign concept for a lot of our people, because my grandmother was born on the trap line in the bush and did not go to school, in residential school. And she passed away in 2019 at, she was over 80 years old. And so this concept of modern justice systems, it was still very much a foreign concept, and based on how our Indigenous people understood that certain things had to be corrected. And so it wasn't an attitude of Kiam that my grandmother took on, but the way I interpret it was a form of, that is sometimes how life goes. And my grandmother shared to the police that no matter what we do, it will not bring back the life of my son. And we did tell my son that he shouldn't have been doing this and he shouldn't have been doing that. So almost like a very, very forgiving attitude. And I know a lot of young people today, and a lot of people that don't have a firm understanding of that philosophy, we'll call it a mentality of victimization, or a mentality of being almost defeated. But it was a real sense of peace that my grandparents had about how life is meant to be, and of course that life is the way it is sometimes. So a lot of these key words that I've heard growing up, and then I've spent many days talking to many people. They've revealed their teachings as I grew older. And when I was growing up, my dad, who is in Cross Lake, Manitoba today, in northern Manitoba, and so it's I believe it's a 11-hour drive, 10-hour drive from my community of South End Reindeer Lake to Cross Lake, Manitoba, and he's racing dogs. He's dog mushing today, and the race will take place today, tomorrow, and Saturday. And so when I was growing up, he was a fisherman, and so that meant that the whole community of about 900 people, the traditional economy in the early 80s was all about commercial fishing using nets. So the whole community would almost shut down. People's homes would be boarded up, and there was only a handful of people left in the community, and they were all very respectful because everybody was kept busy. And the people that were in the community were elders, sick people, or people that, the very few people that didn't have any a role to play out in fish camps. So my role as a young boy was to be in the boat, to watch, to learn. We would be out in the lake by 6:30 in the morning until the sun was at its highest at about 12:30, 1 o'clock. And then I grew up like that. Every summer, my family would go out in the island, no phones, no electricity, all our supplies, and we would live there. My mom, my dad, my brother, my sister, my grandparents were there, and some of the helping hands, because that was the way to make a living. And so I was in a boat, and that was my language nest. I would listen to old people talk, and my dad's older, and of course the people that would help him are also fluent speakers. They'd talk about the land, they'd talk about some of the stories, they'd share, they'd laugh, they'd joke, and my job was to listen at that time. I tried to be in the conversation, but a lot of words were not were as familiar to me as other older speakers. Now, to give you another example of just the fascinating history and the etymology of our words, is the word for thunder. So, Alexandre, what we say back home is a description of the word thunder. It's not a thing. It's an action word. We say "gihtuak," "gihtuak," and what that means is they are calling. And so when I was about 11, 12 years old, as a boy, I was visiting my grandmother's house, and that was one of my favorite places to be. And it was the dark purple clouds were coming from the east, and they were started to, you could see the flashes of light. And my grandmother says, "Bihtigui, bihtigui, gittuak, Dave Bihtigui, go inside. There, thunder's coming." And I, as a fluent speaker, Cree as my first language, I understood that thunder, that's what we call thunder. But I thought about it, and I said to my grandmother, once we were inside the house, she took these cloths and she covered up the mirrors, and she covered up, and she says, "Stay away from the windows." And so she's like, I said, who's, and she unplugged the TV. I think there's one, 2 channels.
That's what my grandma did too. She used to do that too.
So a lot of these stories, right? We remind each other of how and why people were the way they were. We may not understand, but we've seen it. And so I asked my grandmother, I said, how come, well, who's calling? And she looked at me like she was a little stunned. And she said, don't you know? Like this, she had this puzzled look. And she realized that nobody explained, nobody told me. And she says, well, Bidisuak. And the Y dialect, we say Biesuak. N dialect, we say Pinesuak. And that means the Thunderbirds, the Thunderbird beings. I said, who are they? And she said, well, they live in the clouds. And I said, and she says, those are the Thunderbirds, are the ones that make those noise. They're calling each other. And I said, oh. And I said, well, what about the lightning? Yeah, the lightning is what they shoot down. They're the ones that create the lightning. I said, oh. So my understanding, my introduction to the language using key words has allowed me to access or to start a conversation that goes deeper into stories, explaining certain words. So today, the word, a common term for electricity, is literally translates to thunderbird fire. Of course, escuteo is fire, a thunderbird fire. So, for me, it was fascinating because in my community, our community does not have, it's starting to have, there's some individuals that are starting to do some ceremony, but most of the individuals that do ceremony go to other communities that where those ceremonies to acknowledge the Thunderbird being, to acknowledge grandfather wind, that were our people were told were not good. Our people, my community has a church. It has a Catholic church, and it's fair to say that the Catholic Church has been there ever since my community has started to be established. Because before that, our community was always simply almost a stopping ground, a camping ground, a gathering place, because it's the connection between downriver and upriver. And so when fur trading came, that was one of the places that they put a fur trade post, because it was ideal location up the lake or down the river.
Is it like a summer camp?
Almost, yeah, a summer camp, but people also stayed there all year long. But in the winter time, they would go to their respective trap lines. So definitely a summer camp, but people did stay there all year long. But it wasn't sustainable, because the other trap lines, family members went to their respective trap lines where they knew they could access sustainable food, fish, moose all year long. So the summer camp was ideal for a location. So the church and people that would come in preaching, they would tell us ceremonies, drumming, those stories were no good, and that they were associated with bad entities. And so when I was growing up, I had no anything regarding lodges, ceremonies, drumming, singing in the language. The only singing that we heard was church hymns in the language. I still enjoy very much Cree hymns, like Amazing Grace and others, because the language is so it's a beautiful thing because both songs are really associated with a spiritual nature. But anyways, so when I was growing up, nowhere in my community would you see any resemblance, connection to indigenous ways of spirituality. But the language still retained it. Nobody talked about the Thunderbird being. Nobody went into ceremony or talked about the ceremonies that had and acknowledged the Thunderbird being, yet the language, what we called thunder every day, me as a young boy, just put the pieces together and had my late grandmother teach me. It was a teachable moment. It was a teaching. And so that, of course, it's such a fascinating thing. And today, through hashtag Cree Simon Says, I introduce things, and people will, all I do is I monitor so people don't make fun of each other for speaking the language. That is a product of assimilation. My grandmother's day, she would always respect the way different people spoke. But in my dad's day, my dad would be first generation on the reserve. And his generation didn't live on the land. They didn't travel as much. They're the ones that really started to stay in the community all the time. And so, this free-flowing river of visiting people downstream and upstream started to become pools of separate water. Pools, instead of a flowing river that cleans itself every spring, that grows and is full of life and every summer, and freezes up in the winter, and then again has a natural cycle every year. That can be compared to our understanding as Indigenous people is at one time we appreciated different ways of knowing. We accepted other people's ways of speaking, and we weren't so particular, and we didn't have this attitude of that's wrong. This is how you say it. And so when this generation came around, that were either forced to not speak the language through residential school, or were taken away to go to residential school, and when they came back and they were told that's not how we speak, and they were made fun of, that closes a person's braveness to play around with the language, to learn with the language, to grow stronger in the language. When you make fun of a person, that allows that fire that's in so many of us, it just kind of, it's like pouring water, and in that water, slowly that fire goes inside, and people stop speaking the language. They stop being brave to speak the language. They only speak to their grandparents. They only speak to their to older people or their old family members, because other people that have inherited this segregated, this isolated mentality have made a negative impact in how we should be supporting the language, how we should accept different ways of knowing, and how it's our responsibility to appreciate, to encourage, and to go out there and connect. And so there is a river. It's called the internet today, but it can be very dangerous. I sometimes ask people, I said, are you on Facebook? And if half the people say yes, and half the people say no, and then I say, do you have hashtag Cree Simon Says? And maybe a quarter of the people will say yes. 75% of the people will say no. I said, for those of you that have Facebook, you can check out Cree Simon Says. for those of you that do not have Facebook, don't have Facebook. It's a dangerous place. So the indigenous language researcher Candice Gala from Hawaii, I believe. Today she's in the University of. She's done some work at the University of Victoria, the place where I'm doing my PhD, and she's. I've quoted her in how she's shared that using social media can be a double-edged sword. So it can be good, but it can also cut you if you're not careful. So, and in my studies, I've learned that technology is only as good as how you use it, and that is true for any tool. Like we can have a book. We can have a book. It can be filled with amazing content, amazing words, old words, but if we don't use it, you might as well give it to somebody else, and it can be very useless. So of course, that's what I also promote other people as I try to share as much as I can. It is a bit of an older platform compared to TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, but I actually like it more. I've tried Twitter, I've tried Instagram, I've tried TikTok, but I find my time, I don't do it full time. I have a job and I have a family, and I already commit anywhere from 1 to 2 hours a day on Facebook, creating content and searching for memes, sometimes watching too many videos. And so, of course, but in the demographics, I don't know if I can share the demographics. I thought I had a presentation here that outlined some of the.
You know that you can share if you want to show on your screen.
Yes, let's do that. I will share my screen. I see what I want to share. Let's see, where there's a share button. Present.
Yeah, present.
Okay, share screen. Share screen. Entire screen. Oh. Okay. Window. Here we go. Share. I'm not sure if you see this. Are you seeing anything?
Yeah. Yes.
All right, perfect. So if you take a look at the demographics, I'm not sure if you want to call it analytics, the data. Let's just keep it simple, Simon. Yes, keep it simple. All right. The gender is 72% women, 26.8% men, 14% custom, and the age of the group that has more than 26,000 people on Facebook is around my age. I am in this category here. 35 to 44, 45 to 54, 55 to 64. I can identify with this group because I'm noticing that there are a lot of fluent speakers. Now, if I was to go into TikTok, I would be focusing on this demographic, but I would have to speak less. There would be less interaction. I love that there's a lot of elders that are in this Facebook group. And I love that people are saying, I don't know what this page is about. I was invited because my auntie or my mom or my grandmother or my dad or my uncle shared this group with me. So I absolutely love those reasons why people. Now the insights of course, Canada is the largest group of people that have joined. United States. I don't know of any speakers from Nigeria. But I am very careful. I do think that there are people that do use Facebook groups or social media as a way to um, tap into potential malware. You know, um, I don't want to call it phishing scams, but that does happen. I know it happened. I blocked people from the Philippines, from Indonesia, Nigeria, but I also know that there are some people that have moved there. Our people have moved all over the world, and I also know that the United Kingdom does have some people that follow me, and on a regular basis. So that's also very interesting. And here, the largest city, of course, Y dialect territory is Edmonton, Alberta, 2,926. Saskatoon being one of the largest cities in Saskatchewan, Winnipeg, Prince Albert, Regina, Calgary. So this is all very, prairie province focused, which is a lot of our Cree people and the materials that they produce, and the interest stems from the TH dialect, Y dialect, and N dialect territories. And I am fascinated with the R dialect. I am so happy, Alexandre, that we have connected, because when you say we say the same thing too, that makes me happy, because that is my theory from the limited interaction that I've had with L dialect speakers and R dialect speakers.
I've heard that the R dialect was everywhere before it disappeared.
I could imagine that we could find that in history and why that is, but because our Cree people are always they're gentle, they're respectful, a lot of those R dialect terms would have been adopted into other dialect communities. So we may not identify it as our dialect, but I bet you a lot of the words that we share are within our Cree people across Turtle Island today. So for this one, in the past 60 days, as of February 16, you can see the number of how it's grown, and it continues to go up. And so, of course, during the holidays, it went higher because people have more time to spend on Facebook. So, but it continues to grow, and I'm very happy. I don't promote, but I do continuously engage and ignite conversation. The popular days are on Fridays. I'm not surprised. People want to really take advantage of Fun Day Fridays. I don't know, but the times I do most of my posting right in the mornings around 6 a.m. because I know that when people wake up.
I want to stop you. Are you still sharing your diapo, your presentation?
Yes.
I only see your PowerPoint, not the diapo.
Yeah, I just shared two slides of the PowerPoint that I had.
We only saw one slide.
Okay, let me just share that again. My apology.
Maybe you can share a whole screen, and then we can see everything in case of you only shared for one screen.
Now, can you see? What can you see?
Oh, we're seeing your whole PowerPoint.
Can you see the total members, popular days, and popular times?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Mm-hmm. So that's what I was talking about. And now can you see Oh, there's Cameron, by the way. I know you interviewed him, and Cameron's a fascinating guy. As his story will tell you, that he started to take an interest in the Cree language based on my Facebook site. I take no credit for him being fluent, but I love the fact that he does acknowledge that that interest came from the website that I've shared. And of course, can you see the gender insights in top cities? Yes? No? Oh, what did I do? I don't hear anybody.
It seems like you're sharing your comment on ça, the presentation, but we only see the file.
So I'm not sure what happens there, but I stopped sharing. Looks like
Right. Well, I think we can. We have understood anyway the how you reach a lot of people first, and how influent you can be. When I see some foreign countries, maybe we know that in the Second World War there was code talkers in indigenous language. Maybe some people, if you see people from Ukraine coming to your site, you will understand that they want to have their own Cree code talkers. Maybe they will contact you directly. What I understand also with your method of teaching is particular because usually we understand, and it is said that when you learn a language, you understand a cosmology, a world point of view. You got a lot of insights on people's history. But it is assumed that it comes after you have been trained in the language, but you seems to take the other way to make the language available through stories, through philosophy, through making obvious the deeper sense of the language. Is it
Thank you.
the way?
Merci. And that's exactly all I want to do is I want people to realize that there is a great depth, a great history, a great enlightenment, and a great value in our language. We just have to make those connections. So thank you.
Yeah, whenever I'm learning a new words, like it always says a story about the words. Like when you say like the story about the thunder, I never heard that story before. But for us, thunder we say unimskew, so it doesn't say about the thunder being. We would say unimskew breshish for the thunder being a thunderbird, but I don't think we have legends or stories about these beings.
Can you say that? How do you say thunder? I heard Penishish, which is how we say bird in the N dialect. We say Penesis, and of course the TH dialect is Pithesis.
Mm-hmm.
Y dialect is Paces. But what did you say for thunderbird?
Pereshish, unimskew pereshish.
Ominskio?
Unimiskio.
Onimiskio?
Ouais, unimiskio pereshish.
Onimiskio. What does that mean?
I think it sounds like that's something that falls on the ground. Boom.
Okay.
Unimskio p'tishin. P'tishin. It falls on the ground.
Yeah.
The being that falls on the ground.
Yeah, I like that, and you should look into that. That might have something to do with maybe lightning or yeah, of course the landing or the noise it might have made. So no, thank you again. Thank you very much.
Anyway, I had the question. I forgot about it. It was so interesting. I see that also looking at Bruce Lee, that you have added the subtitles, and then it comes down to the way we write the language, and well, last week in Washington, I met Miche, speakers from Mexico, and I asked him because he was like you, really a fighter for the language, and to be taught, to be seen, to be heard. And I asked him if they have a writing system. He said, "Oh, we have a lot of concern with normalization." And I was wondering if the Cree, how finally you get a system of writing it that can be used by all the different dialects speakers.
That's a very that's an age-old question. That question has been contemplated by many people. Should we be writing the language? And if we do write the language, how should we write it? Should we write it in syllabics? Should we write it using English letters, which we call standard Roman orthography? And so I have seen in my lifetime the value of adopting a common way of writing. And I do agree that if we do not find ways to capture, if we do not find ways to present the language for future generations, we will start to further distance our selves amongst each other. I believe that our knowledge base is like a jigsaw puzzle, and some of the things that we all should know are with me, and some of them are with Alexandre, and some of them are with André. So I have seen people write. They say, "I don't like using English letters," or "I don't like using syllabics only. I will use this different way of writing," which is okay. But if you're the only person, or maybe even the only community writing, I think we're missing an opportunity to strengthen the language. Now, one of the things that I also like to share when people say, how do you say goodbye in Cree? And I say, well, there is no word for goodbye, because the word goodbye in English is very final. It's the end. We have no words for the end. We have different ways of saying goodbye, which are farewell terms. We say muestas, which means later. Ki toam kawa pamitin, I will see you later. Or the older people would bless you on your way to your journeys and your travels. And they would say, Manitu kasewimik, Manitu kagitapamik, may the Creator bless you, or may the Creator look after you. Now, if you take a look at the word goodbye and you trace it in history, and back in the days where Shakespeare would use the word goodbye, and how he would speak, he would say, "God be with ye," or "God be with you. And of course, English over time has really modified and shortened a lot of our words. And instead of saying "God be with ye," "God be with you," we end up with something that's almost not understood, goodbye. And so that is the danger of not writing in its full form, and that is the danger of not learning from language nests outside of your own. Is you start to forget the history and the story of how those words came to be and why we say certain things and why certain ways are not easily translated to our language. It can be, but we have to understand how we ask those questions. We have to understand the question that we're asking in English. You have to try and understand the word itself, maybe even the history, or maybe, and then you start to think about the language speaker and how they would receive the question.
It's like it's mostly like a spectrum for me. There's a word with its meaning, but it can also mean this and this and this. But in French, this doesn't make sense. This word doesn't make sense because they're more like it means something else for them.
Exactly. And unless you have a strong command of the French language or even a knowledge of how those words came to be, sometimes you're gonna hit a brick wall, and it's gonna be the translation isn't gonna work. So it's very fascinating, and I have to apologize. I'm gonna have to get ready for my other meeting pretty quick here. But if there's anything else, I hope that I can answer your question in the next 5 or so minutes.
Yeah, maybe you can just conclude, because I see that you are now working on the indigenous languages revitalization. And my question would be, can a language that is losing ground each year since generations and generations, can we take really the way back and have the language used currently again?
I don't think it will ever be as strong as it as it once was. I think it is a journey, a personal journey, and a personal commitment for a person to learn the language, and that personal journey will take you to places, to fascinating, very rewarding places, if you continue to ask and wonder and connect with people. But if people simply just want to say everything that they would say in English or in French and back and forth, I think that is the approach that schools have taken. And my background in education tells me that if that fire inside a student is not at home, it is very hard to help it grow in the school. And so I would say that if a community or if a person wants to learn, I think they absolutely can. One of my friends, his name is Stephen Andreas. He works over at Blue Quills and oftentimes works with Kevin Lewis, Dr. Kevin Lewis in Minishtiquin. He's a white man from a farming community, and that studied theology. He was going to be a priest, so he moved to one of our communities, Pelican Narrows, and he spent a couple years with an old man, and in those 2 years he was fluent, and his worldview of the Cree language was so different. He never became a priest. It went the other way around.
Another good effect of learning Cree. So thank you very much. You understood we are lazy boys, so you have not let us ask too many questions. You responded it before we asked them. So it was really fantastic to have you with us today. And probably, yes, we can have another podcast because, wow, we have so much to share, and you have so much to teach us.
Yeah, yes, I think we need to invite you back for another time because I got so many questions, but I didn't get to ask them. But maybe maybe what's the status of your language in your community? How many people are speaking? Are they very knowledgeable of the language? Can they make poems of the from the language, like something like that? So maybe for another episode, we'll talk about it.
Thank you so much. I look forward to it. And Alexandre, thank you for connecting on through social media. And I do notice that when you comment, and I'm very excited to see the R dialect make those connections, and the L dialect and Anishinaabem. When, like I said, I firmly believe that we have more in common than we don't, and everybody carries a small piece of the puzzle of what we are ultimately seeking. So thank you.
Yeah,
C'est